Okay. And now I will throw it to Leah for introductions.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Again, I'm Leah. It's great to see you all here. I'm lead faculty in science at Colorado Technical University. And I just wanted to throw this out. So let's start with a little bit of interaction here. So can you describe how you feel about science and math in a few words? I would love to hear what you think of science and math. Anybody want to jump in with some adjectives? Preferably some coffee-inspired adjectives this morning. All right, well, as you might imagine, oh, here we go. Intriguing and helps describe our surroundings. Fantastic. Oh, exciting. All right, so we've got some pro-science.
Love that.
Yeah, that's a good start. Wonderful. Essential. True. We believe absolutely that science and math are essential to our education, but also to, like you all are saying, understanding our surroundings and our world. All right. Well,
so for our presentation, sorry, Leah,
sorry,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
For our presentation today, our central question was, can faculty change the mindset and improve the learning experience of our students with positive and encouraging communication, specifically in STEM? So you guys mentioned some adjectives. I love the exciting, essential, intriguing. We personally love STEM, so we love science, technology, engineering, and math. But more importantly, we want our students to love it too. So as Leah already mentioned, she teaches science, I teach math. And my goal when I step into a classroom is to help students find their way to understand math and find out how useful it really is in our daily lives.
Awesome. And in addition to math, of course, I love seeing how science is in our daily lives, not just with our nature walks and things like that, but also when we change up our grandmother's favorite Thanksgiving recipe. You know, that's all experimentation and learning from our trials and errors. More error in my kitchen than positive, but that's okay. So yeah, one of my favorite things is to walk our students through that and to help them see how science is involved all around us. All right. So our simple truth. So Tonya and I met in person a couple months ago, and we were just chatting about some of our students and kind of their experience in our classes. And one thing that we noticed was that students, when they first come into our classes, are very nervous. And, with math, I kind of assumed that, students might have a little bit more reservation going into it. But the commentary, the narrative was strikingly similar. So some of the things our students have said that we collected very quickly and easily, because we get a lot of these. Math was never an easy subject for me. So I'm sure over the next 5 weeks, I will cry, scream, and say I am going to quit at least once. So very descriptive, right? I'm nervous to start this course, or I have failed this class before. And so our students are very nervous about approaching the science and math classes, largely sometimes because of an experience in their past. So would anybody like to share some comments maybe that they've gotten from their students, especially if you're teaching science and math, or if you're teaching something else and you maybe have students who are excited to learn it, or do you find that your students are nervous as well? So please let us know what you teach and what students, kind of their general narrative going into the class. For those of you who weren't expecting a question. So what you teach, and then what your students have to say about it going into your class, because I'm sure the narrative after they've taken your class is positive. History, okay. Well, I can empathize with the non-history folks. That's something that doesn't stick for me, but it's really interesting when you can present it in a way that relates to real life, or tell a narrative about a story, a historical person. There are lots of ways to reach people and bring them in. And we try to do that same thing in science and math. Nervous and afraid.
Another math, wonderful.
Yeah,
Nervous and afraid.
right. I think that sums it up. Yes, absolutely. Chances of success are low, possibly based on past experience. Financial math.
Yeah, I noticed that low confidence. That's an issue we definitely have coming into our classes. The students just do not have the confidence in themselves that they have the ability to learn it.
Yeah, I won't do well. They want to predict the future a little bit, but of course we as instructors want to help them see their potential and help them to do well, and achieve their goals. I'm not good at it. Yeah, absolutely.
We see that a lot. Yes.
All right.
Thank you guys so much for the participation.
Absolutely. And I think we're hearing some common themes here too. So Tonya and I were chatting and we were thinking about, how can our faculty help to change that mindset and improve the learning experience for our students? How can we change that narrative that they feel like they're not going to do well? And there are a couple of things that our faculty do well to help those students set themselves up for success in our classes. The first thing is simple: welcoming students, communicating with our students, not too often. We don't want to do too many outreaches, but we do want to make sure that that our students know that we're there to support them. Being kind and authentic. We do have live sessions at CTU, so our students do have the opportunity to be synchronous. And so they get to know our style and our wording and our tone and our personalities. And so we really want to be more transparent with that. And then also finding common interests. If they're not math or science people, where are they from or where would they like to go? Traveling, that kind of stuff is we can find common ground outside of the classroom. And for our students, how do we know if the classroom that we're providing is a positive learning environment? Well, they're going to be in class, they're going to participate, they're going to contribute, and as a result, they're going to do well. And they're hopefully going to happily surprise themselves in how well they do and what a positive experience they're having. We also can tell what the kind of the student experience by their reviews. We do have a lot of feedback. At CTU, we have opportunities for students to tell us about their experiences in the classroom. And so we, as lead faculty, look at those to see how students are feeling in the classes. Would anybody like to share any kinds of strategies that you've tried to help change the mindset of students, especially for those who say, I'm not going to do well, or, have that low confidence? And we can come back to this too, because we would like to pick your brains as well. Seeking help. That's a good one. Yeah. How do we help our students find that support? Our faculty is often the front line for that. Normalizing growth.
Love
to
this next one too.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love the way that's stated. Yep. Keep trying, keep improving. Wonderful. Okay, Tonya, I'm going to pass it to you.
Okay. So thank you guys so much for sharing your points. And we agree. We think that enjoying STEM is less about rocket science and more about relating well to others and helping them, encouraging them to seek help. So something for you guys to think about, and we're going to share our stories while you can type into the chat. Is there a topic that you may not have been interested in, you may not have liked, but a friend has, and they've encouraged you to like it by sharing their interests? So while we give you a minute to share, if you would like, we're going to have a little story time. So my example is book club. I enjoy reading, but I tended to stick to the same author, the same genre. I didn't really branch out until I joined my book club. And my friends would share their favorite author or their favorite book. And from their enthusiasm and their interest in it, I've now ventured out. I've learned to enjoy other topics. And it's been a lot of fun for me to have that confidence of seeking other genres that I usually would not have.
That's awesome. And Tonya's is a little bit more intellectual than mine. Mine is more, my son really likes history and geography. He is using the classical model to learn his geography. So a lot of singing and a lot of, activities when it comes to that. And I'm really trying to get interested in it and to put those pieces together. So again, not being a history person, but having someone who loves history around is really helping me to explore that and kind of conquer that feeling that I'm not good at it. So would anybody else like to share some things that maybe their friends or family members are good at that or like that you, out of your care for them, you you like it too? Music? Good idea. Yeah,
Example.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Especially when you're taking a road trip and you're with somebody who has a different opinion about music, that can be fun.
That's a great example.
Yeah, great example. All right. So, as we spoke to before, we sort of have this cause and effect that Tonya and I were exploring. The faculty temperature, so to speak, the temperature of their classroom, and also the effect of students. So how are the students responding to that? And so we looked at the faculty classrooms, and we do have an observation, system at CTU to see how faculty are doing, things like grading, feedback, and that type of thing. But that's not really what we wanted to look at. We wanted to look at the types of things that contribute to an encouraging, motivating, and positive experience in the classes. So we picked out a few of those, and we looked at one faculty at each level, kind of the less engaging, the fairly engaging, and then the very engaging levels. One faculty for each of those in science and one faculty for each of those in math. So just kind of a selected view here of the classes to really illustrate what's happening, kind of that cause and effect with faculty engagement and then the student response, the student experience. So a few things in the classroom that we thought were important to that temperature of the class is the introductory discussion board, saying hello to someone. What's the tone? Is it timely? Did they respond quickly, or did it take 5 days to say hi to the student? How important is that student feeling at the moment? The live sessions. So is the faculty engaging? Are they asking questions? Are they encouraging discussion? Or is it a lecture? What's the focus? Is it on the student learning, or is it on what the instructor wants to say? And then finally, with our outreach, again, tone. That's definitely a thread that we see that's very effective and important with that engagement. Attentiveness, personalization. Are we talking to the student or and making that student singularly important, or are they one of many that we're speaking to? So all of that goes to the idea of, what is the saying? No one cares what you know until they know how much you care. So really putting that foundation of being attentive to the student and prioritizing their experience in your classroom.
So Leah explained how we gauge the positivity, the engagement, the motivation of our faculty. So we also had to look at the other side. What was our student experience like? So we had a mixture of data that we collected. As mentioned earlier, we have a live session every week for our students, and we looked at a few different things in the live sessions. One, were students attending? What were the attendance numbers? And did it vary throughout the course? Were students participating in the chat or the discussion in one of two ways, by typing into the chat as you guys are here, or by unmuting and talking in the live session and communicating, participating? In the outreach, we did look, and we will provide some examples throughout this presentation of outreach messages from students and instructors back and forth to see what that communication looked like, and also the percent of students who took the time to respond to the outreach. Did they feel the connection and feel the need to respond back, or not just the need, the desire to respond back? Student success, that one's pretty self-explanatory. We were looking at how well did students do in the class, what was the grade distribution, so on. And then quantitative data from our discussions within the courses, or as Leah mentioned earlier, we have end of course surveys. What did students have to say about the course itself and or the instructor in those surveys? So now it's your turn. If you would like to share, can you think of other ways that you would measure student experience in a classroom? If you have it, feel free to type into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Anytime you guys want to type in, please do. If you have comments as we're going along, we would love to hear from you guys. So as Leah mentioned, we took the less engaging, fairly engaging and more very engaged faculty, one in math and one in science. So now we're going to take a few minutes and break down what we saw in each of our classrooms for those faculty. Reaching out is a great example. Thank you. So the first faculty member we're going to look at was a math instructor. And as you see from that rubric that Leah explained, this faculty member scored a 50%. So engaged, but not overly engaged in the course. Here are some things that I saw in the classroom. The students tend to match the level of engagement of the faculty. Students were also less engaged in this class. How did I know that? Well, from those live sessions, the attendance was lower in the live sessions. Students were not sending messages to the instructor. They weren't reaching out for help. They weren't responding to messages the instructor had sent them. And this instructor had fewer students respond to the end of course survey. And I'll show you in a second what they did say. As far as student success, unfortunately, the students in this class were not quite as successful as the other courses, and the grade distribution was lower than we had hoped to see. Now, this one last detail I threw in because one item we see a lot in our end of course survey in our math classes that students want more practice. So one option our instructors have is to provide practice problems within that live session. So I wanted to see one of two things. Did the instructor have practice problems? And two, how did they approach it? Well, this instructor did. And they would introduce the practice problem, wait to see if any students responded. And instead of accepting that maybe the students weren't going to respond, they kind of put a little pressure on, which did not work so well with students who were nervous or anxious about the course. So it's just something that I'm going to be mentioning with our math faculty. So here's some of the data that I collected for this class. Less than 30% of the students sent messages throughout the entire course to their instructor. A few students completed the end of course survey, but it was a lower number than we see on average. And here's a couple comments they made. I would strongly suggest having more interactive time in the live chats. And I like the way the class is set up. What do we not see here? We don't see any positive comments about this instructor, which we really hope to see in our end of course surveys. I also wanted to include a message from a student who was nervous about the class and how the instructor responded. So this student said, "This will be my first math course, and I can honestly say I'm super intimidated. Math has never been my strongest subject. English and literature, I got you. Math, probably not so much." The instructor's response was pretty academic. Mathematics is a fascinating subject with many practical applications. It's also a fundamental building block for many other fields of study. Whether you're studying math for personal interest, academic requirements, or professional development, starting with a positive attitude and willingness to learn is key. And they're right. Starting with a positive attitude and a willingness to learn is important. However, I think we can say that this student was not taking the class out of personal interest. So I did not feel that this response was written intentionally for this student. It wasn't individualized to this student. And I have a feeling the student also felt that because there was no response then from the student after the message.
And I think that's a great example. And it kind of put that burden back on the student. Well, you need to be willing to learn, and it's like, well, I don't know. When
The difference between willing to learn and being really intimidating. So
exactly, yes. I'm sure the student was willing to learn. They were willing to share their feelings as well, but that kind of got, tamped down a little bit, unfortunately. When it comes to science, the faculty, the classroom that I looked at, and again, we have great faculty and they meet a lot of the expectations in our classrooms. They're doing those checklist items and they're doing their grading on time and all of those things. But what does a student feel in their class? And so with this introductory discussion board, the faculty was generic, really, and distant. Nice to meet you and welcome aboard. Thanks for sharing a little about you with us, and I wish you all the best in your future career and education endeavors. So very general, very distant, very impersonal, and that's not what we're going for. That's not how you build a rapport or get to know someone. In the live sessions, the faculty didn't encourage anyone to speak. They just referred to it as a meeting, and didn't ask questions, didn't want to engage with students. They just wanted to be heard, which is nobody hears you when your only goal is to be heard. When it comes to the outreach, again, and just impersonal and distant. And then there were a lot of D students. Sometimes if a student is behind in class, that D can be a win, right? I mean, we've all been there. We were like, just getting somewhere on time is a win, even if we're just like 2 seconds early. But when it comes to Ds, a lot of times they're missed opportunities. So what if the student had gotten some guidance or some feedback and said, wow, you're doing great in all of these units, maybe just focus in on this one assignment and try to improve that one. Or if you can just push through XYZ, then you can do well, you can get the grade you want, type of mentality. And that's not the support the students got here. And so I really see those Ds as a missed opportunity due to the temperature of this room. So let's take a look at a conversation in this classroom. This is an example. This was up on one of the first slides as well. Just a really telling statement about how the student felt about the class. I failed it already. I tried tutoring. I need to be taught detail by detail. Nobody has time for that. I have anxiety. Very revealing, conversation there. And, it's a struggle that causes me to not even want to log in and try. And then the faculty says, sorry to hear that. You can start attending the live sessions. This has proven to help students who struggle with remote courses. This has proven to help, yeah. So very, very impersonal. I don't know that I would be excited to attend that live session. Anything else, I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope that this class changes your mind. I would love to see you in our live session so we can talk through these things, or I have some great tips that I'd like to share with you. Anyway, so that is, again, a missed opportunity. Great question, Jared. And I didn't really go into the details on the stats. We used that observation rubric that we showed with a different introductory discussion board, the live sessions, and then the outreach, and we put numbers to those, and we assessed our faculty based on that rubric. So that 27% score in relation to the others, which you'll see is very, very low. Great question.
Some of our takeaways from reviewing the classroom and the student experience from these less engaging classrooms. In the math classes, my takeaways were, I believe students were less engaged in the math course, and I don't feel like they were welcomed from the beginning. As Leah mentioned, I didn't include any of the Unit 1 discussion board responses, but they were personalized to a point, but they were pretty generic. And then students really appreciate when faculty make that connection. That response of, I'm super intimidated, an easy response back of, it's okay, take a deep breath, you'll be fine, I'm here to help. And then students, this is an interesting item that we saw, or topic that I saw in a lot of the end of course surveys. My students talk a lot about seeing their instructor or their faculty on camera. So they want them to use our cameras. Now, keep in mind, we don't want the faculty to be bored or distracted when they're on camera. We want them to be excited to be there, friendly, exactly as Leah's looking all around. We don't want that. So they're also watching you. They're watching what you're doing when you're presenting on camera. A friendly tone, we all want a friendly tone. It just makes you feel more relaxed. and more that the person's more approachable. I think that's just kind of every area of life. People feel that way. And then, as I said, I'm looking specifically at the approach to asking questions in live chats. And one approach we know that does not work is putting more pressure on students in the live sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a difference between inviting people to participate and then mandating it. That's a little bit different, or insisting upon it, I guess. Just a couple things to add to that. As the session went on, so we do have 5-week courses at CTU, the attendance decreased with that faculty. And usually we see it either steady or even increase, because if students watch that recording, they want to go to the next live one. But that was the inverse of what happened here. That, students didn't, just kind of fell out. They didn't really want to go to the live sessions anymore. And less than half of the students even replied to the messages because they were so general and not personal at all.
Let's move on to our fairly engaged math faculty. So nice score, an 80%. So I will tell you, this faculty member is friendly. They are engaged in the classroom. There are some areas that they have to work on, and they're just not quite as present as our very engaged person, and you'll see. So how did I gauge that this faculty was fairly engaged, and how did the students respond? Again, the level of engagement seems to match. The students were moderately engaged in this class, and I collected the data from the number of students who attended the live session. And as Leah mentioned a few minutes ago, continuing to attend the live session for all 5 weeks. It was more consistent in this fairly engaged class than it was in the less engaged. More students sent messages to their instructor. So it's amazing. We're seeing more communication between the instructor and the students in this class. And as a result, more students completed the end of course survey. And I'll share a couple of those responses in a minute. And again, the success rate was better. We saw higher grades. We saw less of the Ds. We saw higher grades in this class. And so it seems like the students were engaged in performing better. And again, so just to check in those live sessions, what was happening with the practice problems. This instructor used the practice problems as more examples. They didn't pause to give students time to answer. They just used it as another example. And so it still did not give me a lot of insight to how we incorporate more practice problems. And I'll talk about that at the end of the presentation today too. So what's some of the data I collected? 34%. So a little more than 4% more students were interacting with their instructor throughout the course by sending messages and replying to messages they received. More students completed the end of course survey. Not all of them had to do with the instructor. We did still see some that students are saying math is still difficult for them and always has been. Didn't give us any idea if they felt a little less stressed or a little less intimidated by math, but it's okay. We still want to hear how they feel about it after the course. But this is one I loved. I love my instructor's lightheartedness and his knowledge. This instructor does let his personality come through within the classroom, which is amazing. But like I said, the one thing that this instructor needed to work on a little bit is their being a little more present. But here's an example of how their personality came through. The conversation, the student who was a little stressed about the course said, I'm hoping that the stigma I have with math can be put behind me. This was at the beginning of the course. And this instructor, this is so in this instructor's words, hang in there and keep going. You got this. So didn't tell them how they got this, which might be helpful, but it's in their personality. So this is where it falls in they're pretty engaged, but they can take it maybe a step further. How could they have added a little bit of information to this response to help build the confidence a little bit more, or provide resources? So that's what I was looking at more for this fairly engaged instructor.
Absolutely. And then for our fairly engaged science faculty, this faculty member, like Tonya's saying, it had some very good qualities. This individual, again, very relatable, in the introductory discussion board, welcome to science, the student's name. And then it sounds like you work in aerospace, which has been, your work in aerospace has been very rewarding. And then this instructor goes on to talk about how his dad was in the Air Force and was proud of his time working on fighter jets, and finding common ground with that student. However, there was some hit and miss here. So again, there were times when that instructor was very engaged, very relatable, and let that personality show. But then there were other times where the faculty backed off a little bit and it wasn't quite as consistent throughout. So again, some great qualities there. Again, all great faculty, but some areas that could be improved for sure. The live sessions, very high student attendance and participation. You can imagine being when you're on live, you're a little more engaged. And so, he was very into student participation and conversation and that type of thing. But then with outreach, when it comes to reaching out to students, was not as encouraging and not as personal, as he could be. So short, messages and that type of thing. But the student success was pretty high in this class. So the hit and miss, when you're hitting well, was shown to be pretty successful in this case. So let's look at a conversation that happened in this course. Sorry, I've been sick. I have some health problems, etc. And it says, okay, I hope you feel better, and please reach out to me or your student coordinator if you need support. So, a little bit distant there, an opportunity for helping that student a little bit better. Just an example of how, we miss some, we hit some, and, sometimes sessions are like that for all of us, right? Okay, thank you. I'm feeling a little better today. And then here's a good one. Fantastic. Keep up the hard work. I'll update the gradebook daily so you can see your progress. So, again, with the sometimes yes, but sometimes not so much.
What did we learn from these fairly engaging classrooms? Same thing that we've mentioned a little bit. Notice that word friendly continues to be mentioned. It's important in these STEM classes. Students seem to appreciate a friendly and engaging start to the course. So how you welcome your students from when the course opens, how you respond to the Unit 1 discussion boards, that all makes a difference to our students. It's kind of like when you're presenting, it's that gotcha. Like you're getting them and you're pulling them in. That's really important. And what we see as a result is that students will communicate more if they feel that connection. And again, we don't have to say, oh, I know you're anxious or you're nervous about this class. This is how you should handle it. But it is an acknowledgement of some sort and providing some information. Don't be stressed. But how do you handle it? So we saw the great, the encouragement here, but the next step would have been what can we do to help you? That would be great. And again, that seeing our instructors in person well, not in person, sorry about that. Seeing them on camera really does seem to help the students form that connection. And again, this last piece is really just for me. The students don't need that practice in the live session. So I'm still working on where it's appropriate to put in my class.
And I totally agree about the, being on camera and letting your personality show. Students enjoy the interaction. So I'll start with the positive here from this fairly engaging classroom. The instructor made the live chats intriguing and fun, even though I wasn't able to attend all of them. That student went back and watched the recording. We don't see that a whole lot, especially consistently throughout the session. So it does go to show the impact of a positive synchronous or even asynchronous opportunity there to really see that instructor's personality. Again, with the live chats, I've enjoyed them, hearing opinions and comments from classmates. So it's not just for the instructor's benefit that students share and that participants share, but also for everyone's benefit. We can all learn so much more if we all contribute rather than just one or two people carrying the load there. I will say, though, that in response to those messages that were sometimes hit and miss, only out of a 5-week class, there was an average of only 2.6 messages from each student. So not a whole lot of discussion there, not a whole lot of comfort in confiding in the faculty for maybe some extra time or explaining what's going on or asking questions. That outreach from students, or that reaching back out from students, is a real measure of comfort. of their willingness to interact and, communicate with the faculty. So that was a little bit, that again, an area of opportunity there for that faculty. So.
Okay, hitting our last set of data that we have to provide for you. And this information comes from our very engaging students, our very engaging faculty. So as you can see, 87% score. And as I've mentioned with each one, that level of engagement is matched. So the students were very engaged in this class. Let me tell you a little bit about this faculty member. They are very friendly, very upbeat, really have a passion for teaching math, and students are seeing it. So more students attended the live chat each of the 5 weeks. There was a lot of communication going on back and forth between the instructor and the students, whether it was in discussion board, it was in the outreach messages, or in the live session itself. And of course, survey showed that the students really enjoyed this class. So was the student success. We saw higher grades. And, as we mentioned, and Leah mentioned this earlier, higher grades is not a sign of success. That's not the only measure we're looking at. So when I say higher grades, I do not necessarily mean that they're all receiving A's. I mean that they're doing better. Those students who may have had D's towards the end of the session, they pushed them to keep finishing, to keep working and to finish strong. And it makes a difference in this for those students. It's amazing how you can really encourage some students at the end. So success, when I say higher grades, does not mean all A's. And then, as I mentioned, I'm checking those practice problems just because it's something our students are always asking for. And this instructor use them as an example. They didn't have time for the students to stop and practice in the chat, the live session, but it seemed to be okay. Here's what we saw from the students. 70% approximately of the students sent messages to this instructor. And here's what I really love. Notice the end of course survey comments. My instructor was very thorough in her teachings. I'm a visual learner and fully enjoyed the PowerPoints she used in the live sessions. My instructor made math fun. Love that one. My instructor was amazingly wonderful. I most definitely felt like she was there to help with anything and everything I needed. She reaches out to make sure help if it's needed, and she's concerned about the work, but she's very encouraging. So from that last message, she's not just saying, oh, you missed an assignment, or oh, the deadline for this assignment is. She's asking, do you need help getting this assignment completed? How can I help you do as well as you can do on this assignment? And that's really important. So in this one, the student, again, here's our example, was a little nervous about starting because math was not their strong point. And here's the response. I appreciate your honesty about taking a math class. They acknowledged that the student was nervous. We have a lot of resources to help you, such as free tutoring and recorded live chats. They offered, here's ways that you can get some help and the additional resources we have in this class. And this last one, which I think is really important, let me know if you have any questions or concerns. That instructor is there to help, and they're open to answering questions. They're open to meeting with you if you need that extra time. And it really does make a difference for our student. And as I just said, look at all the feedback that's my instructor did this for me, my instructor did that. So opening yourself up to connect with your students and being friendly, encouraging, and motivating made a huge difference for these students. And the one thing that I didn't mention, but you probably assumed, is these 3 math faculty all taught the same course. So it wasn't a difference in the material subject.
Yeah, same thing for the science class as well. With our very engaging faculty, I did the same thing. Our very engaging faculty member, the introduction. So just saying hello to the students. As someone who had a cheer mom, I can tell you how much it meant to me. I was on a competitive cheer and dance team. I loved looking out and seeing my mom. So very personal response there. And an incredible contrast to what we saw, from that first instructor that we looked at. This faculty goes on to discuss even more about that personal memory that she has from having a cheer mom. So again, relating to the students out on with material that's had nothing to do with science or math, and really just seeing them as a person and relating to them as a person, absolutely key to that relationship connection there. And then with the live sessions, asked a lot of questions and, lots of student participation. And I will say that at the beginning, when students are just trying to figure out more about their instructor, it's awkward. That silence can be really awkward and intimidating. And of course, you may have noticed, I tend to just fill the silence because it makes me nervous. But this faculty was very patient, and, didn't pressure the students, but also invited them to contribute. And that led to an incredible experience for our students. With the outreach, personal and engaging conversations, authentic messages. So changing, things up to reflect their tone. Specifically. And then again, the grades weren't higher per se. And that, like Tonya was saying, we don't measure success by the student grades, but we do see the support there for each student individually to achieve their best, to earn the grade that they want. So what are some things that I can do to help you? Where could this faculty, this faculty did a great job acknowledging where the student could work and helping support that student, whether that was just personal encouragement or directing them into the classroom to help them see where they could make the best improvement for their grades. That type of support was essential. So let's look at a conversation. Again, this is a super neat faculty member. The student said, "My son wanted to ask you why the rock and roll series of marathon in Hawaii was not great," because she mentioned that in one of her live chats. And she says she didn't do rock and roll, but she did the Honolulu marathon. The course support was horrible. The course was beautiful. So just relating to the student and chatting with the student about this marathon experience and running experience, the student is actually thinking about, training with her son to do a mother-son race, which is really neat. And then the faculty, again, is supporting that. I've met many mother-son running duos. You can do it. Just have fun and enjoy your time with him. So just what a neat extended conversation. The faculty member wasn't trying to shut it down or to dismiss the student or to keep it in the classroom, which is often what science folks anyway, and I'm assuming math folks too. We get a little academic and we want to stay in our lane. But we're remote education. So we are in their homes, we're with them on their phones, we're with them everywhere. And so they are, our students really want to make those connections with us in a way that's not just in a classroom, so.
How could you not want to connect with this faculty member though? If you felt we're in this class, how could you not feel comfortable asking any type of question in the class? It's great. I love this
incredible
conversation.
Hey, I just wanted
so
to interject with a 5-minute warning, you guys. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So we'll pick up the pace a little bit. So our takeaways from the very engaging, same thing we've been mentioning, friendly and welcoming tone from the start of the class makes a difference. Students will then connect more and communicate with you more, and engaged students tend to lead to successful students. Whether success is a D in the class or an A in a class, there'll be more engaged students tend to be more successful. And I'll let Leah take over here.
Just to add to that, in comparison to previous faculty, an average of 4.1 messages from each student. So almost a message each week from each student. So incredible difference there. Just like Tonya saying, the level of comfort students felt with that faculty member. I think that's about it.
So, can faculty change the mindset and improve the learning experience of their students with positive and encouraging communication, specifically in STEM classes? They most certainly can.
Yeah, and there's just some things to think about. How can we restate our communication to polish it up and make it shine, right? We want to make these things into a diamond. There are lots of ways to interpret written words. So we do have to be careful about how these come across. Hi, not real. It's hard to infer tone there. Class ends soon. Have you tried tech support? That's my favorite. Have you tried tech support? Students do not like to hear that, right? We're not passing the buck to tech support. So we were going to use this as a talking point if we needed some extra time, but it's something to think about. How can you restate these? Do we have these in our own communications? Sometimes we say these things, but we mean them in a way that makes sense in our head, but on paper, it looks different to students. So we just have to be wise about how we communicate with students in the written sense. Okay, so what can we do to change the minds of students even more? And a couple things that I was thinking of, outside of tone and kind of faculty engagement, leveraging technology. So the use of Bitmojis, as you can see, Tonya and I love Bitmojis. We think that they express our personalities. I wish the stickers sometimes were a little, have more variety, but I think for the most part does a good job of putting us into the classroom and making us more approachable in that way. Videos, so another opportunity for students to see our faces, and then interaction in the classroom.
The only thing I have to add to that that's a little bit different for our math classes is we have started math workshops. So in addition to tutoring where students can go meet with somebody else, they also have the option of tutoring through with their own faculty. So they have a workshop, they can drop in, ask questions, ask for a little bit more explanation on any of the topics for that unit, and it has worked well. So we do have some questions here, and if you feel like sharing anything in the chat, we don't have the time to pause, but please do. If you guys have any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. So as we wrap up, what are some of our big takeaways? Being friendly and approachable from the very beginning of your course seriously can make a difference in your classroom. Students feel that connection to you. They feel that you're engaged. They feel your presence in the classroom, and they believe that you want to help them. And it can make all of the difference in the world for our students. And again, simple things. If you teach remotely, use your camera and don't look bored. Be friendly, smile, and let them see. Some takeaways. I'm not going to focus on those practice problems because that's just for math. Students may not need you to acknowledge their anxiety specifically. You can, and that's amazing if you do, but just acknowledging that they can do it. Don't be too stressed. Put your best effort forth. You've got this. Hang in there and provide additional resources that are available to them. Let them know they're not alone in the course. And as we saw with them running the marathon, students want to talk to us, not just about math and science. They want to connect with us. And I like to say this to my faculty who have taught in a classroom. Those students who would come up to you before or after class and talk to you, they still want that opportunity. And we can find ways to have that opportunity in online classes. So just something to keep about and to think about. And if you have any other ideas, we'd love to hear them. So finally, we really want to focus on communicating to help find ways for students to overcome STEM nerves. One last thing that we are working on that we just wanted to share with our other lead faculty in math and science is we're creating videos for our students who are anxious or nervous about understanding why you could be nervous about a course, time management tips, motivation to keep going when you hit that halfway point in the course and you just don't know if you can push yourself to the end, study habit tips. So those are things we're working on and we're going to be incorporating into our classroom soon. So we want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day. If you have any questions or additional comments, you could type them into the chat now. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you for the conversation. Really appreciate the varying levels of engagement. We talk about this a lot at our college because we have graduate, we have undergraduate, we have certificate stuff. We've got people that are just averse to education in general and haven't been in college for 30 years. So really appreciate the varying levels in your approaches to it. So appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Jared. Really appreciate the feedback.
Thank you. And there is a link to a survey if you would like to complete it. It is posted into the chat. Yep, there it is again. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. I will go ahead and stop the recording. Feel free to continue to ask questions if you have them.